Thanks so much, Randy. And it's such a pleasure having people that I've talked to via Zoom now to see you in person. So again, thank you so much for participating in the 2021 Tesla Awards. We couldn't do this without judges who took time out of their schedules to help evaluate the submitted projects. Terry McGowan, who I'm sure most of you know, who is a director at large for the NLB, Naomi Miller from PNNL, Jim Yorgi, who's in the audience, a treasurer of an NLB and independent consultant, Ruby Jadwitt, also with the NLB, and John Paul Friesener from RPI in Albany, New York. So again, great to have these folks who took time to evaluate these projects. Let's give them a round of applause. Our next project is Deloitte Headquarter Link Bridges. This is in London. Lighting design firm is Equation Lighting Design. New street square bridges play a key part in the recent improvement and expansion of Deloitte's central London headquarters. The lighting strategy sought to reveal and enhance the sculptural form of the ramps, steps, and integrated seating elements without compromising panoramic views out in the city after dark. Visually stimulating spaces were created to encourage users to dwell longer and make use of the bridges for informal meetings and social interactions. By considering all viewing angles, both within the bridges and from street level looking up at an early stage of the design process, the optimum LED design solutions were specified and potential glare was avoided. 3D printers were used to create custom collars for the leveling of fixtures on slanted architectural details. All the installed lighting elements are dolly dimmable and controlled by astronomical time clock to balance electric light levels with daylight over the course of each day. Congratulations to Equation Lighting Design, and accepting an award for Equation Lighting Design is Randy Reed. Well, welcome everyone. It's our pleasure to introduce one of our winning projects for the 2021 Tesla Awards, and it's called Deloitte Headquarter Link Bridges. It's in London. Just an absolutely beautiful job. Maida Hutt is the lighting designer, so welcome, Maida. And also two of our judges, Terry McGowan and Jim Yorgi, and I want to thank them for taking time out of their schedules to join us for this interview, but also for the judging of the competition. One of the lighting design strategy for these bridges was to not only reveal and enhance the sculptural forms, but to create visually stimulating spaces, to encourage users to make use of these bridges for informal meetings, social interaction. What do the owners and occupants think? I mean, have you had a chance to circle back and see if they've really, met their needs, and if you're pleased with the ultimate goal here?
It was really a pleasure to speak to the owners, occupiers. I mean, Deloitte basically developed this for themselves and fitted it out. And it is a commercial environment which they recognize it needed, obviously, under the WELL certification, but just generally from their ethos, it needed something more to connect the buildings that we built about 8 years apart, and with different styles, and they needed really to connect people. It's not like we are in one building, you're in another, and they really needed a space that was a nice breakout visually, so with long views, also space where people could pause and sit and sit quietly or have these chance encounters. And I think what the space did bring is, because there's so much interest in terms of visually, it's not space that they found in any one of those buildings. It's done in a simple and very bold way. People don't go quickly through it. They do use their time. And for them, it's something like they see that as a resting their eyes on something that is quite novel, very, there's nothing commercial there. It's like a bit of a sculpture that they're looking at, and they can actually use, they can sit, they can perch on. So that's a real sort of a success in terms of what we set out to do together with the architects and sort of the whole of the team, is to create a space that is sort of useful and yet quite novel, that it doesn't look like, it's sort of very functional in its nature. So that's the sort of, it was really good to see that feedback, that people were actually quite keen to just be there.
I know that you had to do some mock-ups. I mean, even before, the design process, or as far as the early steps of the design process, make sure that it was visually comfortable, so no glare for the occupants, and then also from street level, so that whether it's pedestrians or cars wouldn't be subjected to glare. So any particular challenges in achieving this glare-free, visually comfortable environment?
I think what we were helped a lot with a big advancement in technology in terms of the design of the luminaires, because we could select effectively the luminaires that you can never, from the street level, you can never look into, which was really important, because typically you can always look into the downlight, because we use the miniature dark lights, which you can only look into them once you're really right underneath, standing on a bridge, and really trying to get your eyes right into one of the sources, because they're so divided up into small miniature sections of the downlights. They're sort of clusters of the chips which have their own optics. So what we could do is create something that you never have a downlight to look into. And with regards to uplights, one could ask, we have 165 uplights per bridge, the miniature ones. What we've done is through the mock-ups, we have 4 different optics for them. They're actually aimed specifically, and with the 3D printers created colors, and aimed in such a way that, unless you're actually leaning, trying to catch an eye onto the light, if you snag it, you can actually never see into them, and they never cause discomfort. So it was very extensive trialing from the viewing point, from the mock-ups, but that was the product of that was something that don't go through the space where the light is something that you notice. It's something that it's just there for you to enjoy it. So there's no show from the lighting point of view. It's just blended into the interiors. That was the aim.
One of the questions that judges had, you think about anticipated maintenance for an installation where you've got multiple sources all lined up in a row, and we know how sensitive our eyes can be if things aren't quite perfectly matched. And I just wondered if you just had some insight or what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I think the color stability, maintenance is the big thing. As I said, we have a lot of sort of sources there, and the color stability was a key. Obviously, the first thing is how long it will last, and we were only selecting from the top quality chips, discussing it with the manufacturers, that we knew where they were sourcing it from and what the curves were in terms of the life expectancy, in terms of the color shift, and any of the sort of other attributes of the LED sources. So this is our estimation. Obviously, it's based on the data we received. That there will be about at least sort of 10-year a good stability, not noticeable shift through the installation. We're between 10 and 11 years, and then there may be potential sort of noticeable shift if sort of perhaps in a 10% of the light sources. And we discussed this with a client, and that was acceptable for them. We can't, as a consultant, we always have to draw the attention to a client that nothing is maintenance free. LED sources, everybody's sort of saying fit and forget. It's not exactly like that, but it can be controlled in a way that there are spares if something gets broken, obviously on site, in a particular sort of numbers. And also, we have worked with the manufacturer to select only from the best sources. So you can imagine, the uplights, you can really sort of compare them along the route, and they're next to each other. So the color constancy is a key.
description talks about you have a dolly-based control system that's dimmable. Sort of two parts to my question. One, did you consider at all going to color tunable? I know you talked a lot about color shift, but did you consider color tunable to change the color in response to the time of day and you know the environment from that perspective? And you mentioned time clock control. You said something about daylight, but did you use daylight responsive input to the control system?
Yes, in terms of the tunable white, color tunable, we have considered that. Unfortunately, at the time of the specification and I suppose the costing of it, the costs and the spatial implications of tunable white within these miniature sources wasn't going in our favor. So we had to give up on that idea. That would have been ideal because it allows fine tuning. We do have these actually controlled in the sections and sort of paired on the drivers where we could have that would have helped sort of within the lifespan of the luminaires. So that couldn't have been afforded, if you like, although considered. And with regards to daylight and the time clock, what we have is also presence detectors. So what happens is that obviously the light is set considering the daylight condition. So there is no overlighting during the sort of sunny day, although there is still some emphasis onto the ribs along the way on the bridges, sort of the central sort of pieces. However, also we have the presence detectors as well. So if there is nobody there, the lighting goes to the lower levels in the evening. So we have sort of dual sort of control, if you like. I don't know whether I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that actually does answer it. In fact, that was my other part of my question, is the presence detection if you're utilizing that. That's great. That's a great scheme to add one on top of the other, multiple layers of control.
Certainly one of the things that struck me about it right away is this is something you don't expect in a downtown environment. Usually when you see a bridge like these, they're very plain, they're very functional, they're often quite low. To see one up in the sky, to see one that obviously is not meant for just getting from one building to another, but as a place to be, is visually a showstopper. You know, people must stop down on the street and look up at it and say, what is that? And what are they doing there? And why does it look so elegant? It's like peering into a room and you really want to be there. And then seeing how the changes are, and as you pointed out, the lack of glare by very careful design really makes it all very visible. I think those pictures, the one for Bartlett Court, I thought was particularly helpful because it puts them both out in all of their glory without giving you too much detail. In other words, people still have privacy, but there's something up there that's absolutely fascinating, I'm sure, to the pedestrians. And so my question is, I wonder if you've had people gather on the streets and look up there and kind of point and say, what's going on and what is this thing? It's got to have been a showstopper in many ways.
Well, it's with Instagram these days, it's Instagrammable pictures. Yeah, I think it has been sort of looked at as something that is quite cultural. And it's cultural in the environment, which is otherwise pretty plain. You know, office buildings. But this actually, there was a drive from the client at Deloitte to create a jewel, as this is connecting one building that's 8 years old or so to the very new one, which is headquarters building. So headquarters is supposed to effectively sort of be quite sculptural. We've been involved in the lighting of all the interiors of that building, but it's sort of like it sort of offers its tentacles to the old part. It's almost like a reaching out and saying, this is the way forward. And, you know, we're reaching out to the next door. So it's been interesting for people walking around, because public realm is quite nice on the ground level, but it's not expected in a 3D, if you like, you know, when you look up. So it has been sort of well received from a sort of taking snapshots. So that was good to see.
Well, I'm glad they're both high enough. They don't look like a high truck could bang into them or something like that, which is always my concern if I'm walking over one of those things. But these look just right. And I like the fact that one looks very straight and very formal. The other one, not so much. It slants, it's at an angle, and it is obviously a different kind of space. So visually speaking, I think they're a treat, and certainly people must stop and look up there and wonder a lot about what that is.
Maida, you mentioned 3D printing. I didn't quite understand that. What part of the fixtures were 3D printing?
Well, what we had is on these miniature uplights, lighting in between the slats. Because the bridges, as Terry was saying, they go up and down and they're slanted, and you have these ramps from which the slats go up. So in order to aim the lights from the floor onto these slats as the floor goes up and down, we needed to create some sort of, if you like, colors. But because the colors had to be, in a way, almost each one was different because of the angle. How we resolved it, it was all designed in a 3D CAD, and then it was then 3D printed for each one of the uplights slightly differently, if you like, to be underneath them. So between the floor and the frame of the uplight, there is a little collar that is inserted to level it in such a way to bring the light source where you want it to be, so to adjust to the actual levels of the bridge. So that is the bit that you couldn't have, it needed to be very precise and had to be done, if you were just doing it like cutting it, it would be very crude. This was really in a millimeter, and sometimes it's only very thin sort of padding, and in other cases is higher up. That's what it's been used for, not for producing luminaires, but it's like a sort of packing underneath.
Understood. You had also talked about the 10 or 11 years, hopefully without color shift. Which chips did you specify on this job?
Well, they were, depending on which luminaires were, Osram was used, Cree and Nicha.
Okay, all three. And I think Igazini were some of the fixtures?
Yes, there was Igazini and two other more UK-based manufacturers as Light Graphics and Mike Stone to create sort of more custom luminaires.
That is certainly a remarkable detail to have explored 3D printing to custom design that particular detail. And I will imagine that it's not obvious that you did that for anyone looking at it, but it took a tremendous amount of work to do. Wow.
Again, thank you and congratulations for a beautiful job. And we'll look forward to future submissions from you for perhaps the 2022 Tesla Awards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.